Alt Går Bra, the burger-based group, will be recording today. If anybody, this is a bit ridiculous, but I have to formally say it will be recording, and does anyone have any objections? No, everybody registers, there's no objections. I'm not going to do any paperwork. So, for those of you who aren't coming from Kirkelo, I guess maybe even in Kirkelo everybody's familiar with who you are, or no? So we have a Bergen-based group here called Alt Går Bra. Tutto va bene, everything goes well. They've been in residency down in Kirkelo beginning of this year, and they suggested they come up here and present their project. They're a group of visual artists, then researching the intersections between art and politics with exhibitions, discursive events, and publications. And that's something at the Institute we're happy because we've actually had more than one in the last 3 years of interdisciplinary workshops or events where people, performing artists, have discussed the intersection or the meetings with academia. We've actually had some events along those lines here. And one of the important mandates of this institute now is to create interdisciplinarity from the sciences to the arts and the humanities in the middle. So they've pretty much been around the world presenting their work, and they're going to talk a little bit about the method today. Well, they'll tell what they're going to talk about. So I think we'll just say welcome to the Norwegian Institute. I'm looking forward to it. We're all looking forward to hearing this.
Thank you very much. Just to reiterate, so then we're 3 members of a group of visual artists then called Alt Går Bra. So we formed in 2015. We're based in Bergen, but we also work in Paris and London. And we're actually speaking earlier on with Anna about the name Alt Går Bra and how this kind of reflects our practice. And this concept maybe of positive dialectics within our work. But maybe we'll go into a little bit more detail about that as we go on. So we thought we'd start by pointing out 2 components in our work. So the first is setting theory and practice at the same level. And as you mentioned, an emphasis on interdisciplinarity. And then the second is the project built namely from history and philosophy. So perhaps I can point out, we recently did an interview then with Zana Gilbert from the Getty Institute for a publication called Perspective, which is the journal for the Institute of Art History in France. And I can find it. I don't know if I want to be able to hold it up with the mic. So the name of the interview was Looking Back to Look Forward. So perhaps this sort of reflects the importance of history in our work. This edition is in French, so the interview is in French, but it will be translated eventually into English and Norwegian. And if anyone's interested in reading the interview, we do have an English version, so we'd be glad to send you it. Just to finally add, then, we're very glad to be presenting our work at the Norwegian Institute in collaboration with the Finnish Institute, and again as a way of instigating dialogues with scholars from different fields. And we're just coming then to the end of our residency in Rome, which began in January at Circolo Scandinavo, which is in the most beautiful place, just next door to the Villa Farnesina, so we couldn't ask for too much more. So this is very much a kind of perfect end to our residency, and so then to thank the Norwegian and Finnish Institutes for inviting us. So we're going to speak then about 2 projects. The first then is the Norske Idealstaten, which is a project that began in 2017. And then we're going to move on to a project that we began researching actually during our residency in Rome, which looks at the classical ornamentation of the Acanthus. So actually I should have been flicking through some of these images. So this is us actually just prior to a conference that we held at the University of Westminster. And just shows a bit of our work and how we combine often then theory and practice, often spoken word and practical elements. This is an installation that we did at the Victoria and Albert Museum last year. So I'll pass over to Agnes, who's going to speak a little bit about the Norske Idealstaten.
Thank you, Oscar. I'll take that. So, the Norske Idealstaten. It's a project that we started in 2017, and it's still ongoing. The Norske Idealstaten rewrites Plato's Republic with the people of Norway. So we depart from the Republic as this oldest Western envisioning of an ideal state. So our understanding of this Republic is actually designed for practical implementation, not as a utopia and not as irony. What we are intending to do with this project is to talk about is how to use the past to underline human agency and affirmative dialectics. So the practical implementation has two components: discursive and artwork production. So I'll show you some photos. We have been traveling all across Norway and talked to people about their ideal state. What is that? And we should say that in this project we have not allowed for critique or for negative critique. So people would have to formulate something in the positive. What would they like? So this is a private interview in Buganes in the very north of Norway. Here we are in Bergen during the election. And here we are in the market in Levanger, Trøndelag, an old traditional market called Mersemarknaden. And this is in Ålvik in Hardanger, a small village with about 500 people, so most of them here. And so, after the discursive part, we use the answers that people give us as an inspiration to produce artwork in our studio. So the result is this ongoing series of coats of arms for the ideal state. So we follow the heraldic tradition, and the content has different inspirations. Maybe some of you can recognize some of these motifs here. So we've used Cesare Ripa's Iconologia from 1593 and Andrea Alciato's Book of Emblems or Emblemata from 1531, quite a lot. So these are, like this one, is from the Iconologia, but kind of we picked out the elements of the allegorical figure. Same with this. And this is an Alciato emblem. This one too. And so we have been very pleased with this project. We've talked to about 3,000 people at over 100 events all across the country, from Kirkenes to Kristiansand. And we have also organized events, discursive events for groups, something we've called the School of Rhetoric, where we've used Aristotle. We have had public debates and, as you see, also private conversations. And we were surprised to find that when we looked at the results, that 80% of the people are talking about the same thing. So you're probably quite curious what that same thing is. Actually, what people want is more time together. They want more physical meeting places. So they're talking about this coming from different angles, but they 80% end up with this as the most important thing that they want in an ideal state. So what happened is that we got an impression of the Norwegian people and what the Norwegian people want that is very different from what you see in the media. So you have this idea about what people think, but then when we actually go out and speak, it's not at all the same thing. One of the things that are recurrent that is interesting is this love, a lot of love and care for each other, and wanting to have contact with others. But another thing is also a lot of interest and love for art, which is not always the impression you get in the media. Also, we were surprised that people were willing to engage with a little bit complex content when we come and talk about Plato and about philosophy in an ideal state and art. It seems also that there is much greater interest than we could expect. I think that that's maybe what we should say about Idealstaten, and then you can ask questions afterwards if you like. So that's me.
Okay, so I think that we said we would speak for about 20 or 30 minutes, so I guess that I would have to do 80% of the presentation. No, but we said that we would, for the sake of being a little bit organized, would say a little bit each, but then it's going to be a joint effort and please feel free to interrupt and ask questions. So we, as my colleagues said before, we've been at the Circolo Scandinavo now for 2 months, January and February, and so we are super happy that we did get this residency. And the reason for us to want to come to Circolo is because we've been to Rome several times. We live in Bergen and in Paris, so for us it's kind of easy to come to Rome. And we are just basically fascinated with Rome. We are very interested in the humanities, and we do have backgrounds in the humanities and in the classics. By the way, we call this lecture Contemporary Art and the Classics. The word classics is now very contested. So we wanted to provoke a little bit. The word also contemporary art is contested. So mixing these two together may sound a little bit provocative to people who are really paying attention or reading between the lines. So another popular answer for the dreams and vision for an ideal society, in addition to being together, was that people wanted to engage in activities, to have experiences in life that felt more fulfilling. And we believe, maybe in a grandiose manner, that's the job of the artists and the humanists. we believe that the humanities and the arts can bring something that is less superficial and more fulfilling than what we are exposed to so much in our everyday lives today. So Agnes mentioned this preconception, and this project in Norske Idealstaten was very good for us, because even if we are very platonic in the sense of believing that people are good, that ideally people have good intentions, and everyone wants to do good, and at the end of the day say, I am good, I'm a good person. For some reason we behave very much as if that was not the case. And doing this project, instead of thinking about it in our studio or in our office, really proved to us that people seem to want to do good, and that people did have initial responses. So the project was, we had what we call like private surveys. So we'll meet with people privately, like in this woman's house or at the library, and the surveys would last either 2 minutes or sometimes 1 hour. So they were at some point we felt a little bit like we were like kind of psychoanalysts or something, that some people really wanted to talk. And again, it was very interesting because Ike Klage, we would not let people complain. So that there was just one rule, because it's very easy to criticize it. This is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. No, we want to listen to what you have to say that you really want. So this project confirmed a lot of like beautiful things that Alt Går Bra wants to hear. And we believe that classical activity has a lot to offer in that sense. The classical values are somehow different, but this is of course a very long topic, and we are very much interested in classicism and romanticism, but this is again a very huge topic that of course interests us very much because we're artists, but we believe that maybe these two are concepts that could help us understand things in bigger perspectives, like something that goes beyond just art, just empty art movements, but almost like there is a classical and a romantic aim or élan, I think in French would say, or something, that maybe is the Apollinian and the Dionysiac aim. Maybe not, we don't know. Anyway, so we've been coming to Rome quite assiduously, and we said we need to be here for a longer time, and it's too bad that we are here only for 2 months. So the idea was to come here to research something that we discussed with Manuela in one of our visits. We came to the Norwegian Institute because we're very interested in the grotesque or the arabesque. So we come here mainly to look at paintings. So we're looking at ancient, like Roman paintings, mainly this grotesque, but also Renaissance. And we ended up becoming very interested in one element of the grotesque. That is this one leaf that is called the Acanthus leaf. And so we would go back to Bergen and to Paris and find these leaves pretty much everywhere. Maybe we can use the computer.
Is it on?
So we feel a little bit like in this aquarelle or drawing by the author of this is Henry Park, and it's called student studying the Acanthus. So you see a person there going up the ladder to a monument that is in the Roman Forum that maybe some of you recognize because of the particular Corinthian capital with the helices that twist into each other. So this is Castor and Pollux because of the so we feel very much that so the helices and so we feel very much like we are doing this nowadays, like going around and looking at the Acanthus in the capitals, but also everywhere else. It's in decoration, furniture, paintings. So we would go back to Bergen and look at the Acanthus, and then we said that we wanted to start kind of mapping the Acanthus in Bergen, in the facades. So we are going a little bit too far, I think, probably, because we are working with a computer programmer and with a specialist in construction and architecture in Bergen. And so we decided we wanted to start mapping the Acanthus in Bergen. So basically we developed this database application with sites throughout the city where you can find the Acanthus. So this is linked to photographs of the building, the basic history of the building, and with close-ups to the Acanthus decoration, and to photos also of the historical building. Like there is a website that is very good from the University of Bergen. It's called Marcus, where they have a lot of old photographs of the city. So they are linked to that. So we will present. So we started working on this like a year ago, and the first presentation will be now in March in Bergen. So we'll have a talk, and we'll have 5 guided tours through March and April. So you can come with us and we'll show you the Acanthus in Bergen. So it's a matter of discovering art and architecture and heritage in your city. So in very practical terms, that's pretty much it. It is also about opening the doors of the art institution into the wider public in the wider city, right? It's not just us contemporary artists, doing our own contemporary art thing, but it's how to work with an contemporary art institution to out on the streets. Yeah, so this is like the circuit of one of the guided tours on top, and here there are some buildings. I think there's one more. Yeah. So this has been a long journey, and it's a fascinating project for us, because it's that one project that we really don't have an answer to our questions. We usually start with answers. So these are some photos that, no? I think a lot of researchers also start with answers.
Hypothesis.
Yeah. So, but this is a really, honestly, open-ended project. We think that we are after something important, but we don't have an opinion about the Acanthus. There's no value that we can still put in the Acanthus. Is it a bad thing or a good thing? So, but we thought that maybe these photos would illustrate a little bit what we are up to. So looking at the Acanthus in Rome, in Paris, in Bergen, and then starting with this research and finding that there was this miniature column, or probably the whole building, that was made in Greece for people in today's Bulgaria to have as a model to copy. And then in the as early as the 3rd century of our era, this syncretic version of a Corinthian capital with a Buddha in the center. So where people from a very far away territory from Greece and Rome, they appropriated the Acanthus, they appropriated the Corinthian capital by putting the image of the Buddha in the center. And then, much closer to our days, appropriating the Corinthian capital with corn and wheat in New York City. And then, even closer to our times, this is a bar in central Oslo that was renovated in 2011 because of some Olympics, I think, Winter Olympics or something. So they hired this contractor from the UK to renovate the pub, and they decided to produce this very classical decoration. So if you see that there is a detail of the Corinthian column that is not made of marble nor of wood, but of plastic. So it's a 3D printing of classical elements. And underneath we have another version of the Corinthian column in the Acanthus in Murmansk in Russia, which is an even less expensive and less laborious version of it. So it's basically vinyl. So you have a photo there from Google Earth of the building before. This is the facade before, and this is how they decided to renovate this restaurant by placing two Corinthian columns printed on vinyl, and then they glued it to the facade. And then the last finding, I think you've heard about the riots in Lebanon. So we're watching the news and we saw the new prime minister that was flanked with these massive Corinthian capitals. So there you can see just one, but there were two on each side. So we trace the setting of the former prime minister of Lebanon, and that's not there. So this is, one more of the questions that we're asking. What does it mean? Why is that this new prime minister flanks himself with these massive Corinthian capitals? What does it mean? So we think we're getting up to something important, but we don't know what it is. So we are very happy to be here today because even if you will probably not have the answer for us, but you may have other questions and interesting remarks to make. But I will just read out the points. It's better if I read them. What is it we are trying to reflect upon with this project? So number one is the division between art and architecture. That is very important for us as artists. And also as important, the division between arts and crafts. Like, are they two different things? Are they not? As well as the abandonment of ornamentation in architecture nowadays. And then point number two is we're trying to, through this project, we're trying to think about the intrinsic value of art in the form of ornamentation in the public space. Because nowadays, people hardly think about art when I think most of us hardly notice ornaments. But when we see ornaments in buildings, then you not necessarily think about art. The number 3 is the meaning of architectural and cultural heritage today. And number 4, maybe it's a bit more complicated. So there are issues that, like, how is the city of Bergen has inscribed itself in larger geographical and historical contexts. So by looking at the Acanthus, we can see the ambition of the city of Bergen that many other cities in Norway didn't have, or at least in such a prominent way. Of course, it's a lot of Acanthus in Oslo too. And then we think that we can learn about cosmopolitanism versus the local. And the topic that interests us the most, which is classicism versus romanticism as organizing principles that extend beyond the arts. So maybe we can wrap up with a conclusion and then open it up for questions. I have a few more slides. Yeah, so for those of you who have never seen the Acanthus before, this is from Villa Alto Grandini. They are taking over the entrance of the villa, so if you want to see them, just go there. And then the two main uses of Acanthus in art and architecture. So one is in the Corinthian capital, in the composite of course, and the other one is in the scrolls that some people call vine scrolls. Because we are looking into Acanthus, we would like to call them vine scrolls, but scrolls. So the plant, the Corinthian order, and the other use that is in the Franke in Norwegian, Ransom in French. So this scroll is of course the one from the Grotesque, right? So this form is like kind of a cosmopolitan form that is, I think it's not even contested, that it is the most versatile form and maybe the one that lasted for the longest time and that expanded the largest. So apparently the first documentation of this is from 1400 BC. That was something like this, and then as we know, it's been developed by the Greco-Roman civilization, and then it went to, like we saw, India, China, Japan, and then it came back to us through like Muslim Islamic civilization, like Byzantine. So very long lasting. Yeah, and here this is a little bit history of it in like the history of the Corinthian. How the Corinthian order, if we do believe in orders, how is that it was formed, right? So here we have the 5th century BC, the temple of Apollo at Banzai, where we don't have the Corinthian order, but so there is Doric, Ionic, and inside there's just one Corinthian column, and then it's allegedly the first fully Corinthian order. So it's this is in Athens. So maybe you wanna wrap it up.
Just very briefly to wrap it up then, so as we mentioned a few times for us, it's really essential to be able to get to have a dialogue with different disciplines. So it would really just be opening up a discussion with you all to maybe respond to some of your thoughts to the presentations and the two projects. But also maybe it'd be great to hear your thoughts about the relationship perhaps with classics and contemporary art, how one may feed into the other, or whether or not you feel that there's a division. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. I've become the or comments. Perhaps we can just, is it right to carry on passing the microphone
I
around?
don't really think we need the microphone.
Okay.
It's easier to that.
Yeah.
I was interested to hear more about your Pompeian connection.
Yeah.
How do you interpret or use Pompeian paintings?
So we make, I don't know if the word fana or
For the Norwegian speakers, fane,
Banners
Banner.
in English.
banners.
like for parades in Norway, the 17th of May, there are like these very important parades where a lot of the unions, schools,
Religious groups.
religious groups.
Organizations of any sort.
So we make these banners for ourselves to take part in this kind of popular.
You know them as union objects, maybe. You parade in the union with a stick with a big textile with the text
Yeah,
and the
so we
image.
take-
That's it.
You have, so you have copied some Pompeian wall
Yeah,
painting
exactly.
as a banner.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
which panel do you choose?
Now we can reinvent it.
Use different
Yeah.
elements from a little bit different
Yeah.
parts.
Okay, so it's interesting to know also if you choose a different special part of a wall with third style paintings or
The third style is what interests
Yes.
us, but the composition on the banner is quite different than the composition on the wall. So therefore we've incorporated a little bit different. But you know, very often there is a kind of sense of this figure in the middle and the kind of frame around. So we use these elements.
So
That's very sketchy.
If you
I
remember,
can show you
at the
after.
beginning there was this machine, like there was this installation with this machine, that is a printing machine. So what we did is we made this figure into the center figure of the grotesque. So there is a woman that is holding the machine. It's like the Cariatide holding the machine on top of her head. And then there is this all grotesque.
I don't really have a question. I just have a couple of comments, scattered comments. Well, first of all, thank you very much because it was really great to see your work and everything that you have showed, everything you have talked about. It's actually absolutely intriguing. I was struck by the contrast between your first project on Platon's Republic, which seems to be, from how you have described this project, sort of inspired by a sort of social kind of background. You wanted to know more about the society you're living in, and you wanted to produce something actively resulting from your interview. So it's
Exactly.
sort of communal, so to speak, project involving many actors. And whereas at the opposite side, the Acanthus Project is a little bit more kind of standard artistic research projects. So you have spent time in Rome researching the origins of the movie and how it's I must say I see here a contradiction, but it's how do you, I mean, is there any social public use of the Acanthus project in the same way as you have worked on political issues with the Republic project, the first project that you have talked about. And that's a very first comment. And I also really like a lot the idea of cosmopolitan image that you have talked about, sort of image that pop up everywhere. It's with subtle differences according to the place. I mean, I'm actually working on the movement of images, so of course I'm very interested in this. I mean, I'm actually working on the movement of images in the Renaissance and Baroque period, and I'm actually very interested in this idea of spread of motives all around the Western world, but actually you have also shown the impact of this motive. But now actually I remember you have also showed the image of the Lebanon Prime Minister with the Acanthus next to him. So there is a possible political use of the Acanthus, which is parallel probably to the Republic project. So I mean that's very. There is not a red thread in my question, but it's just a couple of comments. I don't know if you have anything to add about the difference between the first project and the second project, and how you realize that the Acanthus is a mobile motive. I mean, it actually reminds me the work of Abi Warburg on the vehicular image, how actually images move on the Western world, and how their meanings can be replicated in different areas. So,
I think it's very interesting comments.
Yeah.
And I think we normally say that our projects do have kind of a material output, a discursive one, and also sometimes a little bit performative of some sort. So with this Acanthus project, we've said that it's very open-ended. So it's not concluded. We don't know where it will be going. And obviously it has this social aspect of this database leading to a tour. And what is interesting is that already when we start talking to people about this project, like I talked to my mother and she sent me immediately 7 photos from her living room of the Acanthus around in her room. Me too, I have Acanthus.
There's a familiarity, but it's also this ubiquitous aspect of the Acanthus. It's everywhere, right?
Yes.
I mean, we're in the city of the Acanthus probably, but even places like Bergen, that if you spoke to somebody, they wouldn't necessarily directly associate it with an Acanthus. Or
So
with classical anything. Suddenly
you mean it's
Realize
part
that
of,
the
it's a
impact.
familiar part of our everyday life landscape, but we are not always able to notice. So it's also work on the attention that we
Exactly.
pay on specific aspects of our landscape.
And the public role in the Acanthus, that it's not something that's just hidden inside people's homes, and particularly how, say, contemporary art's become this ownership thing. It's something that belongs outside in the public sphere. It's something in the street. And like Agnes mentioned with her mum, it's something that maybe, to an extent, perhaps people feel that they can all own a part of.
Yes, but I mean, especially that image of the Prime Minister of Lebanon is particularly telling from that point of view. I mean, it's the Acanthus also serves as a sort of framing device to the power. It sort of gives sort of authority to the power, so to speak. Thank you.
Maybe you want to say something
really
about Rosamali.
Yeah.
It's important.
Do you think I do that? No. Yeah, and also you mentioned Ranke, but the Norwegian appropriation of the Acanthus is also krillranke that we find in the rosemaling, in the rose painting and carvings. So there are especially some very famous altartavler, in the churches, the altar pieces that are carved actually in the Baroque period, inspired from Italy. There were some carvers that were making some really beautiful Acanthus motifs in the Gudbrandsdalen area.
Yeah, so there is also that other dimension that is really good to be from Norway, studying the Acanthus. because there is this genre, this it's called Rosenmaling, so painting roses, that feels very much like something autochthonous to Norway. Is the Norwegian craft folk art, and it's in the end Acanthus, right?
Krillranke means Acanthus ranke. That's what it is.
I have some comments to both. The first is point of departure with your characterization of academia. I think it's a bit difficult to characterize it as anything because there's so many different approaches to it. I was speaking to a colleague, professor, yesterday about the different approaches with people who, in a way, have a theoretical model which provides answer and then is pushed down onto the empirical world, forms our perception of the empirical world. You have also those that simply describe the empirical world. Well, an ideal is actually a dialectic process between observation and practice and thought, which creates good science. So if you think of the project with the Acanthus, there's something very archaeological about that project, because basically this is what archaeology has always done with objects. Think of a thing like the chariot, which spreads out from eastern Central Asia into the western Mediterranean and Mesopotamia, and then through Europe. And then for some reason or another, 1,400 years ago, 2,700 years ago, it turns up on rock carvings on the western Norwegian coast, where there's never been a chariot. You can't drive it. You can't drive a pram there. So it's a bit. Acanthus is also something that's very alien to the actual natural world that we're talking about.
Exactly.
But how do we explain these things? And we try to create one explanation. And if you look at the Acanthus, you told part of the story of the diffusion through time of the Acanthus through different areas. But there's probably different meanings in different situations. There's probably different explanation why it's changed. It could also, coming from the Mediterranean and then spreading, and then the history here, but it could continue, for example, from the spreading from the east to the west to the north, and then back again to the east.
Exactly,
For
back.
example, with the kingdoms in Nepal in the late 1800s, who took it from the British. And the meaning, since you were talking about that, it's ubiquitous. We see it all the time, we don't even notice it. But in other concepts, like with the Nepali kingdom, it was an expression of modernity, it was an expression of connections, and it was an expression of power. So you have to always use these things historically. But in a way, you call it an art project, but to me this is a very sort of classical kind of archaeological approach to it. And that leads over, since we're characterizing, seeing we're putting the world into boxes about calling one art and one academia and one history and this and that. I was thinking of the thing with the ideal state. And I was wondering, what is the connection between that? Because first of all, what you did there was a very anthropological approach, but you put some parameters into it that was not anthropological. You probably didn't follow a strict qualitative methodology in approaching these things. So of course it doesn't mean it's not valid, it's just different. But why is it art? And then what does that have to do with the images with the heraldic images that you showed? So and then I started, and this is a question I often experience as I'm a professor of archaeology, and there's some things I would say is definitely science. That's just a little part of what we do. The rest is, I'm not sure how important these categories actually are.
I think we couldn't agree with you more. We enjoy very much this cross-disciplinary approaches, and also trying to, I don't know, it's just in the way society works, it works for us to fill the function of the artist, let's say. But we're very interested in using different kind of parts of society and disciplines, and collaborate a lot with other people from other disciplines. When it comes to this Idealstaten project, it is what is very important that you were pointing out is that it has a material output. It's not the conversations, and it's not the conversations in themselves and the answers to the conversations in written form, or we haven't intended to publicize that as statistic material, but to show it in this visual form. And we've chosen the coats of arms because in Norway, coats of arms are mainly for areas, right? They are kommune and fylkesvåpen. It's not family.
It's like civic.
It's civic, yeah, civic symbols. So it has to do with the identity, the collective identity of a place. So now Norway is going through some region reforms that makes the question of the coat of arms for the region quite pertinent. And people are reacting very strongly to the changes in these visual symbols. That again is a bit like they are everywhere and nobody notices them until somebody wants to change them. You know, then it's a drama. So for us it's been very interesting to look at that aspect of it. And what we've done actually is like when we've used the RIPA, we've looked at the answers and then we've said, okay, this is the answer, and which symbols does the iconologia say that the artist should be using to communicate this that the person had been telling us. So that's how the motive comes about. It's based on what people have said. Some of them are, like several people have talked about the same thing, but there's one, for example, now I don't know if you can get it back up again, but there's one that has the Noah's Ark on it. And the Noah's Ark is the from a conversation with one specific person who was an environmentalist all his life. And in the conversation he came up with, I would like to see Noah's Ark in the coats of arms for my ideals. So there, and also of course the heraldic language that we've tried to follow quite closely here has very special connotations when it comes to use of color and the division of the shield. So these are also things that I'm part of there. It becomes a little bit of a coded language, but the Renaissance is full of coded languages that are not so accessible for us today. But we are trying to kind of throw all these elements in the air and see, you know, does it take us somewhere? Does it communicate?
What does the one to the left communicate?
Yeah.
This one.
Yeah, the one
Aha. Where have we been here?
I would imagine Vesterålen or Lofoten or something like that.
Actually, it was in Bergen,
Oh,
because the toast comes from Vesterålen to Bergen. Right? But this is also a heraldic figure. But it normally has like a dragon or something on there as these faces, so we just replace them with a codfish. And then, yeah. And then you have, like the top right one is from an emblem that says it's blinded but not blind. So this also kind of answers.
Blindfolded.
No, blindfolded but not blind. So it's like a kind of a hindrance that is not irreparable, let's say. So this also comes out of that conversation. But, yeah. Is this answering a little bit what you were wondering about? Or?
yeah. How do people react to this?
Actually, it's very interesting because in the conversations often we are not saying what would be the result in the beginning of the conversation. And then at the end, oh, interesting that this would be an art project. And then they kind of forget about it. And what we've done with a lot of people is to say, you can give us your email address if you want, and we can send you when we've finished something. And when we send to people, they're like, oh, it actually materialized what I was talking about. So there is a nice dialogue that happens after
These
that.
ones are just a few, right? Because we've talked to, let's say, 1,000, 2,000 people. So not for everyone, but we've done a lot of drawings. So some people get the drawings back. And then out of all this, we make a selection, and then we make, 30, 40, 50 of this. So these ones are real, like they imitate real. They're made on metal, on aluminium, and they're like this big. And we hang them all like in line or all together. And I think most of the titles come from these emblem books that Agnes mentioned before, and these titles are very complicated. Some of them are very, very long. So they have number one, and so you can read the title. So the way you view the work is very different if you can read the title. So let's say this one, there are two hands in a rope in a knot. And the title is, the more you pull them apart, the more they get together. So it looks like a contradiction. You pull them apart, but it gets together. But when you see the painting, it's actually true. Yeah, there was a question, I think. Yeah.
Yes, I was just wondering, first of all, thank you very much
Yeah.
for the presentation. And then related to both projects that you presented today, how do you know, or do you know, when you've reached the end? So what is your sort of idea of, okay, now this feels like we've reached a
Very good
completionary
question.
stage. How does that work within your...
Well, we kind of set a limit to ourselves with this project, with this one, and we said we would not do any more discursive events. So now it's just because we've mixed everything. We thought first we would go and talk to people, and then we would go to the studio and paint. But we've been doing everything together, like keep talking. We had like also assemblies with like more like 50 people, like imitating somehow the Athenian style of democracy and talking for like 2 days. But now we said stop, we need to stop with this, and we need to just do this, like painting. So we actually are going to do a residency for 1 month in Norway, in a very small village. There is a village of the one man in Norway that is the heraldic person. So there's one person in Norway that took it upon his shoulders to set the rules for Norwegian heraldry. And he designed a lot of the civic coats of arms in Norway. And so there is this residency that is like his foundation or something. That is not, it's not for this, it's for something, for artists. So, but it happens that we are doing exactly this. So.
Maybe the answer to the question too is that one morphs into the next, which I think is maybe quite normal often. That rather than just being really isolated ideas and then the next idea, then say, for instance, this one takes shape and it becomes also becoming more conscious of, say, civic art and the function of civic art, and then
new project
that becomes into another project, and then
Interesting. What about the Acanthus project? Since you were saying that you are working very exploratory and with sort of less of a focus on a hypothesis, that could be potentially a sort of endless journey.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that?
Yeah, because we, as Agnes said, we like to always have some material output, and we are very much for going back to the skill of the hand. So we are like, we try to do things in the traditional way, like drawing and painting with oil and all that. So we are looking for an output for the Acanthus project, and we are thinking about casts. But then we don't know what to do with the casts. So if we go and bring the Acanthus down to earth in Bergen, but so we have some ideas, but we really don't know. We thought we also proposed to do the Acanthus exchange with the ship.
Yeah, Statsråd Lemkul is going to do this world tour.
But maybe you have to explain what it is.
Statsråd Lemkul is a big ship that is kind of the pride of Bergen, big sailing ship, and it has Acanthus decoration on the front. That's how you can recognize this ship. And so they were going to do this world tour in 2022, I think. So we contacted them and asked them if they could be interested in us coming along with this world tour and doing the exchange of the Acanthus, so doing the cast, say in Bergen, bringing it to the next city, leaving it there and doing a new cast there that we bring to the next place. You understand?
It was a great project, but they said no.
But this would be really taking the mobile motif.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that would be great. It's like a somehow cross pollination or something like the the ship would become this bee or something that brings the, like, right? So then we go to whatever, to Lebanon or Russia or somewhere, and just make the cast and like exchange, right?
What did they say now?
We don't know.
We never take no for an answer, but this is it would be a lot of work for us to try to reach out and convince them. But we believe we have the best project for that. Is the first time that they will go around the world?
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
okay.
this is not
Anyway.
a lost case yet.
Yeah,
We'll see
exactly.
if we can find another route.
Yeah.
I was interested to know more about the colors. Are you not allowed to use the colors of the Norwegian flag? There's no red or blue?
Yeah, there is. It's a little bit difficult to see there, but according to the heraldic tradition, then you have two metals
Yeah.
that are gold and silver. So this is gold, and this is silver. There is not white; it's silver. And then you have color red, green, blue,
And black.
and black.
It's brown and
Yeah, sorry, the colors are not good. So they are not. No, there are a lot of very strict rules, and so we keep all throughout the same palette, of course, and the same colors, and then the rules of not touching, like, because the whole idea of heraldry is identification, right? You need to visualize and know that this is your friend and not your enemy. So you better to be clear with the colors.
But we haven't been as strict as this man whose residence
No.
name. He's Halvard Tretteberg. So he implemented the strictest rules in Europe
Yeah.
for heraldry, because you can only have one color and one metal. But so all these divisions that we've made, they are illegal in the Norwegian civic coat of arms, or it was until the 1st of January 2018, because then the Norwegian government decided that Norway is no longer following the heraldic traditions. So we don't need to worry about this anymore.
But it's essential that there are all of these really strict
Sure,
rules,
it's
right? And they're developed over hundreds of years. So
It's a
we did-
communicative system. You need
yeah,
to know the
and
rules.
everybody kind
order
of,
to
well, it
understand.
varies very slightly from country to country, but we, as part of the research, we went and visited the College of Arms in London, which is amazing, an absolutely amazing place, and met up with Windsor Herald. So he's the herald for the Windsor family, and so he's one of those guys that walk along on the parade and they look like a character from Alice in Wonderland, yeah. In this beautiful, I think it dates from the 16th century, the College of Arms, right opposite Tate Modern. And they have a library there that keeps the catalogues of all of the heraldic symbols that date back for hundreds and hundreds of years, and the idea being that no two are the same. So maybe there'll be the same motif, but then it'll be on a different, say, metal, or it'll be, and it's amazing how they manage that. Yeah,
Differentiate.
it's so really fascinating.
We had a postdoc at the institute.
Yeah.
We used to work with coats of arms and
Really?
heraldic symbolism. And I don't remember, he's in Britain now, isn't he? He ended up in Oxford, didn't he? Just slipped my mind, I think. He's somewhere or another in Britain. So there's somebody here who's working with that.
Okay.
When you wrapped up your presentation, you mentioned some of the goals of what you're looking into, sort of art and architecture, value of public ornamentation, the meaning of heritage and architecture, expressions of art, the local versus the cosmopolitan. And then the last question, and these are all eternal questions in the historical and material disciplines. But the last question you asked, what was the relationship and what is the division, what is the influence of the classics on contemporary art? I could probably ask Arja that more about that, but I would like to hear, because a long part of our art history tried to sever any connections with perceptions of classical past. It doesn't seem to. If you go to an exhibition, for example, the exhibition that was at Scuderia, the Scuderia, and see the Roman stuff, there's something incredibly modern about it. What answer do you have after looking into this for a couple of years? Is there a relationship between the classics and contemporary art?
Well, a lot of our projects are rooted in history and in the classics, and we would like to see more of that, maybe.
But it's in general. Is contemporary art in Scandinavia, contemporary art in Northern Europe, rooted in the classical tradition, even that it might not be aware of it?
Yeah, I think that you could say that too, because I think that sometimes reacting against something is affirming that you belong to that something that you want to get rid of, but you are there. So.
It's the paradox of the avant-garde.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what we are really interested in, is in looking into what do classicism and romanticism mean beyond the arts. So what does it mean in the arts, and aren't they two categories that maybe are bigger than just the arts, that go more into politics and ways of constructing the world?
And what sort of answer?
Sorry.
And what do you think?
Yeah, so we believe it's very complex. But we do believe that they are very important and that they are kind of overlooked. Also because when we talk about politics, we are quite fixated between left and right, and conservatism and progressive politics. And so we are wondering if they're not like structures that are maybe larger and maybe more, older historically than left and right. If there is not something like the romantic impulse and the Apollos and Dionysus, or if there's not something bigger than.
Yeah, still one thought that I was thinking about when you spoke about the first project, Norske Idealstaten. So there's an interesting comparison at the moment with Finland. In 2 years in a row, Finland has been the happiest country in the world, and now there will be in March, as I have understood, an international congress in Finland where international journalists come to Finland to discuss what is happiness and how, for example, Guardian have already written and wondered how can it be possible that Finns are so happy, and when they can then go and interview people that they will know. People do not think so. The Finns when you interview them. So that was interesting. The comparison that you said in Norway, that the people want to get together and connect that to the ideal state and the happiness. But for the Finns, it's more the happiness is to go alone in the woods or sit in sauna.
Alone.
So that it's very interesting. But although Nordic countries are in the top happiest people in the world, that's why the Finnish researchers are now waiting with anxiously what is going to happen now in March when the next time the happiest will be chosen, the happiest country in the world. So is it Finland again or some other Nordic country, if it will be Norway or not?
I think it is this idea about in many, both inside Norway itself and outside, there is this perception in general of the Scandinavian countries, right, of the kind of peak, the top. So it is quite interesting to do this kind of project with this mythology in a way that it is, right? Because there are many ways of looking at happiness or, what is successful or not. So So
Yeah, because there's a dilemma there, because these very happy countries have very high levels of depression.
yes.
Was it the people when they hoped that they could have more time together, but was it them who connected that with the physical spaces
yes.
together, or was it you? Because that's very interesting, because that has been a long kind of architectural historian, an art historian.
It's in French.
In modern architecture, it has been very long tendency to think about that making physical spaces, you can affect people's life, and making more physical spaces to gather or to connect with that would immediately have as a result something, and it never has gone in that way, because it's not only the physical spaces, but what it needs people and.
Yeah. I think it's very interesting actually, because
And it's also very strong discourse in Finland, at least in Helsinki where I come from. There's a very aggressive ACTA group called More City to Helsinki, which has a strong influence to the city policy and how Helsinki is built nowadays. But it's a kind of not loose, but it's a lobby group and Facebook group,
and they want
more city to Helsinki and more urban space to Helsinki. Urban space means dense housing
okay.
and density.
There's a curious contradiction, isn't there?
Yeah.
That's what we found out a lot from doing the Norske Idealstaten project, was this contradiction between there being a general need for social spaces and places to come together. So just now, this kind of occasion is wonderful for that. And the growth of social media. So social media is discussed endlessly and it rises endlessly, but then actual spaces of gathering. In the UK, for instance, the classic place to meet together is the pub. And the pub is disappearing rapidly, so there's no more of these meeting spaces. And the project was also very much about those meeting spaces, so not just large meeting spaces, but intimate ones, the ones that are linked to a supermarket or just a little.
In Helsinki there is one very successful new public space where people gather and where people make and constantly modify as their own space. It's called Oodi, it's a library in the city center of Helsinki, which is also kind of a little bit modified about the conception of what is a library, because it's not to borrow, but it's also to borrow books, but it's like a free public space where you can enter without buying. You can do things, but borrow artworks and make everything. But it is quite popular because it's inside it.
That's necessary in Helsinki.
Quite necessary in this weather. We have had this November about 120 days now, when it's only raining. But it has been successful because it's something that has been, and it's curious because it's planned for public kind of living room, but not always when you plan something. It doesn't work like that, but people have taken it, the inhabitants have taken it as their space, and at some same time it's very connected to the kind of idea of public space and public libraries, which has been so important in a lot of countries.
So to answer your question, yes, it was people themselves that talked about that, and some of them were complaining a little bit, let's say, about the social media situation that kind of felt kind of prevented us. I think it's interesting also because it's one of the things that you perhaps could do something about yourself, but maybe you need a little bit of help with a framework that the architects can help with, for example. City planners.
But were people complaining about social media? Or?
Some were kind of saying, oh, I really want to have more contact with other people and have meeting places, but I don't know where to go in a way, or like I get stuck on the social media and this is not satisfactory, you know, this kind of thing.
Yeah, just sort of a story. I have an Asian friend who lives in Norway. And when he's in Norway, he complains about all the Norwegians don't speak to, they don't assemble, they don't do anything social, everything's business. And families aren't close and they don't sit on top of each other. And then he goes back to his own country where everybody's always assembled in the same room. Nobody's ever left alone, and you can't do anything on your own. And everybody's always talking. And after a week, I said, oh God, I gotta get back to Norway. I can be alone for 5 minutes. Maybe people don't know what they actually want.
That could be also.
Are there any further comments?
I was just intrigued back to Acanthus, and I was imagining, an Acanthus leaf on one of your.
Yeah, that's true.
And if like you came across hypotheses for why the Acanthus was kind of chosen as the plant that became, because obviously you say it has many meanings since, and I think generally it's just like it refers back generally to its classical form. But when it was used in the first place, were there hypotheses about why that particular plant was chosen, or was it just because the form of the leaf is a good match with like stone carving, rendering a decorative, recognisable form with stone carving, or is there more?
There is this myths,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The Vitruvius and whatever. Do you want to say something?
No, I think it's no. I don't think I can say.
It's
But
like in struck being in Rome, how it's like a weed, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas in England people have it in their gardens, but you have to like take care of it.
But it is very interesting, no, that this weed is chosen as the
Again, it's this
super
ubiquitous
interesting.
thing, but it's also commonplace. That's amazing, isn't it? And then it's suddenly raised to sit on the top of a column.
But there are several theories now about this question.
Yeah, so they most people talk about fertility, right, and eternity also in a way, because also they say that biologically the plant kind of dies and it looks like it is dead, but then it resuscitates or something. So it's like this idea of resurrection. But honestly I think it's too simple, because I think there are lots of plants that are like that, but they are not everywhere as an ornament, right? But I think that there might be something to do with the flexibility of the plant, which is not true either, right? It's invented, because that's why I think it's called vine scrolls. Because if you're talking about scroll, you talk about something like this, and as you saw, there was just a leaf there, right? But the acanthus doesn't climb anywhere, doesn't have any tendrils really. The vines, yes. So it's not true also, this is like as we know, it's idealized plants and invented plants.
Shall we thank the speakers again?
So we want to say thank you again for inviting us, and thank you for coming, and thank you for having so many questions.
Yeah, very
it's
nice.
very good for us.
Good luck with your project.
Yeah, thank you very much. So
And
we'd
if-
like to stay in touch.
Maybe you should come back again in a couple of years time, and to show to the.
And if any ideas about these things
Yeah.
we've been discussing pop up in your head later, here are business cards. You
Yeah.
can contact us.
Yeah, if you see
I
any
have
acanthus,
something about Acanthus to tell you.
take it for. You find some bibliography. We are always looking for books about acanthus.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.